Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Prolix, Comix, Bollix, where myself, Nick, and himself.
Ralph Slime Mold.
That's the one, yep. We talk about comics with an X, with a C, S, or however else you want to spell it.
What do you want to do?
You can spell comics in a couple of different ways.
Right. Yeah, I guess.
I think we spell it with an X.
We do, yeah. But that's
yes.
Young and hip and cool circa 1991.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Right.
Or maybe 1982 even.
It took a while to get to the provinces.
But radical spelling, yeah.
Yeah.
But in any case,
so we're talking about... Is that what that's called? Like
no.
You've had me fooled. You had me fooled.
But yeah. Anyway, so what we're talking about this time
is radical spelling.
Is radical spelling? Yes.
Our new manifesto.
So no, in fact, we're talking about something called Tom Strong.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, if you've ever heard of if you're somebody who reads comics, right, you likely will have heard the name Alan Moore, right? He's written the only graphic novel that's ever showed up on Time magazine's 100 best novels of the last century. He's generally thought to be, have revolutionized the silly books, basically.
He's supposed to be comics royalty, doesn't he? Basically.
Yeah. Which is not to say he can do no wrong.
Well, no, I mean, it's funny actually. He's one of those few figures where, when you start to read more and discover the feet of clay and all that, I'm still in that process. I haven't quite got round to the bit where you're like, but let us not forget, and then putting him back on the pedestal. I'm still in the process of pulling him down off the pedestal a little, but that's just because I don't read that many comics. I would imagine maybe people who are more, up on their comics have probably gone through that process. Yourself, for example, I imagine maybe you're around to I'm putting him back on and polishing him up a little bit by now, right? Or
I think so. I think some of what he's done has been really important, and
right.
And so and we'll speak to that a little bit here. But I think that this is not something like in fact, this is often not talked about really at all for whatever reason. This set of comics.
No, I wasn't really aware of them. I mean, I'd vaguely seen it and list of stuff he's done, but something I didn't really know what it was until you decided to do it.
So when you think of Alan Moore, what do you think, other than giant beard and pagan snake worshipper? What of his work, I guess, would you immediately?
I suppose for me, I very much like From Hell.
Yeah.
And League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are my favorites and the things I associate with him, and also on him, I don't know, a figure that he's like one of those figures who, because he's a little bit more how can I put this, he's interested in a lot of kind of interesting topics and is relatively erudite about talking about them and has some interesting thoughts, and that's all fine and good, but I don't know, some people seem to think he's some sort of weird genius and everything that comes out of his mouth is just and then sometimes you see him talk and you're like, you talk an awful lot of crap as well, don't you, as well as speaking interesting things as well, but maybe that's not his fault, maybe that's the fandom's fault, I don't know, but it's difficult to tell sometimes if he's guilty of the sin of what's the one when you not hubris, but I don't know, is he a little self-important? now and again.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny enough, I was thinking about this not as I was rereading the comics, but as I was just thinking about him. Because I was reading a review of this set of comics just recently, and the person said, like, we often these days talk more about what Alan Moore has said
Than what
than
he's done.
what he's
Yeah,
written, because he's become a bit of an endless rent a quote guy that people go to when they want him to basically rage about something. And he, in that way, he reminds me a bit of Johnny Rotten, who's another person who can be insufferably self-important in some ways. And you read interviews with him and you're like, oh Jesus. But then he's also right more often than he's not. Like, particularly in his criticism, right? Not all the time, but when he is complaining about things, he's often just about right on the money, you know. And I find that with, like, if you really kind of look at the things that Alan Moore has been annoyed by, even though sometimes he seems to be pompous, a lot of it, it's they're legitimate complaints about the way the industry he spent most of his life working in treats its creative people, right?
right. It's just sometimes I'm not necessarily sure if he can. It's not that the thoughts or the criticisms aren't correct, but I'm not sure if he's the guy to solve the problem.
No,
like that. I mean,
I don't think so.
I tried to, because he's also written a few bits of non-comic
Yeah, I think he's written a
fiction.
novel.
Yeah. Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof, that was and then I read. It's funny, the people who follow him as well do seem to have blinded, like, almost anything he writes is just amazing,
Right.
like that novel, for instance, got amazing reviews, and I think, fucking hell, this is a real turgid read that could have been a pamphlet, really, if you took all the good ideas and
right.
Although I do quite like the thing I quite like about him is how I like how he stuck to his guns in terms of staying super local, like in his life. Like, there's something I quite like about that
Like
idea
that
of
half man, half biscuit guy.
yeah, exactly. There's something
Alan Moore also has a strong own bed, own bog policy.
right, exactly. There's something about that. Although, yeah, again, he wrote a lot about that in insufferably boring novel, more than he did comics, as far as I know. But then again, I haven't. I don't know how much he's written about. Where's he from? I've forgotten now the name of the city, but
right.
Yeah. Anyway,
so
back to
yeah. Well, so to get to Tom Strong, I'll do this quick. But basically, I think, for me, the first things I saw would have been like the Ballad of Halo Jones and some of the stuff he did for 2000 AD.
Speaking of massively overrated,
yeah, it's. I mean, I think at the time it was. I mean, sometimes things in their moment.
That's true. That's true. But also,
that doesn't necessarily last the test of time.
I think there's two different kinds of dated, right? I think there's the kind of dated where something genuinely was really, really good at that time, and the kind of sands have shifted beneath it, and it's dated inside. And then I think there's another kind of dated where, it's just that the collective kind of zeitgeist was temporarily spellbound or out of its mind, and then so I suspect Ballad of Halo Jones might exist in that is just something that just wasn't that great to begin with.
Sure.
As opposed to the other one I just said.
Right. So to me, like, and DR and Quinch, which was his kind of like stoner comedy alien thing that he ran. Yeah. So I mean, that's I'm a kid, and that stuff appealed to me. And then pretty quickly, because he was one of the first people to kind of jump ship right from British comics and make that transition to writing for DC and or Marvel, right, or American comics. And so he goes off and he does Watchmen, right? And Watchmen is considered to be, one of the most important sets of comics, I guess, right, of the last however many years.
Just to put into context, then, what I was saying about Golem Hero Jones, I think Watchmen fits into that other category, where I think that probably was like properly shit hot when it was new.
Yes. Oh yes.
And still is good. Don't get me wrong.
I think it holds up. I think it holds up quite well, actually.
But because it influenced things so much, then it now it's, if you see what I mean. So there we go. Two perfect examples of different dated. Oh my God! Why am I not getting paid a wage for this amazing work that I'm doing in front of your very eyes, listeners?
So Watchmen comes out, and it has this like explosive like ripple effect in comics, right? Where basically there's all this ink slung in like newspapers about how comics have finally grown up, and like this is and the funny thing is, of course, we're still looking at men in spandex. Like that is Watchmen. Is still there, right? It's still part of it, but fine.
Yeah. But we'll get to that specifically with this title in a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And so Alan Moore himself, had said, he was trying to do something that only comics could do, and I think he does succeed. Actually, if you look at Watchmen, there's things that happen on the page in Watchmen that you think no other medium can do that specific thing, right? So
absolutely.
He's often complained that he said he didn't write these things to become storyboards for films, because he said I was, him and Dave Gibbons were trying to do things specifically that no other form of literature or whatever of art can do.
But by the way, just before you continue, have you seen the mini? Because I've seen the film, but have you seen the mini series that they did?
No, I've only seen the Zack Snyder.
No, I've not.
Which I think is pretty good proof of what Alan Moore was saying, was that it's fine as a thing by itself, but it's in no way the book.
No. But I hear good things about the miniseries, so I was
It could well be.
Because now that it's a few years old, I'm actually contemplating watching it. Because I certainly can't watch something, heaven forbid, when it's new.
No. But I think
I didn't mean to upset you there, Nick. I do apologize.
For me, I do feel a little bit like, and I normally don't give a shit at all what an author thinks about their own work or what they think about work that comes from their work. But in the case of like some of that stuff, particularly with Alan Moore, and how like how shoddily in some ways like he and the and other creators were treated, like there's a part of me that's like I maybe won't watch it just on principle. Because I feel like it's a hermetically sealed thing. I think Watchmen, those 12 issues, it's not the greatest thing that's ever been created in the history of art, but they're a solid standalone story. And I think a huge mistake was made a few years back where DC decided, well, we have this IP, we know that Alan Moore hates us and will never work with us again, so why don't we spin it off? Why don't we treat it like it's Spider-Man or Batman or whatever? And then
there's now an extended Watchmen universe.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And so they did a series of like comics set within that whatever world, and then even started bringing characters into their regular line. So like, oh, it's Batman teaming up with Rorschach and stuff like that, right? And so some of the writing around the time were saying like, this is a fucking stupid thing to do, because what you had was like the one thing that comics, like the thing that turns most people off of comics now, and I would imagine what turned you off of comics, is this obsessive continuity, fan wankery, and this feeling that like if you come into anything, well, I can't even start this because I don't have 50 years of reading.
Exactly.
And because they are going to constantly reference this stuff. Like if they're not going to leave it in the past. I mean, Doctor Who has kind of potentially gone this. Once you have enough of this stuff, and then if you have people who are writing, who are.
I think the thing that you were saying about talking about what's unique to comics and stuff like that, that is definitely one of the things. So there's very few other examples. So yeah, obviously, like say a film comes out and you have a few sequels, and some franchises go on for a long time, like James Bond, for example, or something like that. And then
Zach Amici and it's 27 movies or whatever.
And then in novels as well. You get, series. You'll get series of characters or whatever. But they still seem kind of, how can I say? They still seem like, yes, I know different characters of different actors played James Bond, for example, but it's a tolerable whatever it is now, 30 film, whatever, how many it is. It's like, it's I don't know, to me it seems to have a sort of continuity, and plus it's not intermingling with other things either, so it's relatively easy to keep your head. Plus they make a point of, you don't have to have seen Moonraker before you watch Living Daylights or something.
Not at all.
But the interesting thing about comics is, like, for instance, you'll have Batman, right? And then you'll have whatever the Batman, and then it stops, and then someone brings, and then you have all these different phases, and a particular Batman means a particular thing. Like I don't know them, but let's say there's a Batman Black or something like that, or it's a bit like all the different versions of Gundam and stuff can be.
Yes.
But the thing with that, it's just one of those things. What I don't understand about it is I understand you can hijack an IP, for example, and do something else with it. I understand I suppose the classic, again, back in the day, around the same time we're talking about, the whole Killing Joke stuff with Batman. It's kind of like using that to do something else, and I understand that. But I think you can only pull that trick out the bag a certain amount of times if you're doing something radically different, right? But now, for instance, I'll see, well, actually, like when we're talking about Tom Strong, the main artist, Chris Sprouse, right? I was looking at, I didn't familiar, so I was looking at just, on Wikipedia, like what he's done and stuff. And I was like, yes, he is written for and then it had this list of things, like they were vaguely, they were like, I saw Spider-Man, but they were like very, like Spider-Man,
2049,
Silver Crisis, dump truck driver or something like that. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And then what I don't understand is, a lot of these things seem like, if you want to write a comic about a dump truck driver, just write the comic. Don't write Spider-Man dump truck driver. And I don't understand. I suppose I don't understand the appetite. Like, who actually wants that amount of insert superhero? Who needs that much money? Who needs that much about? Do you know what I mean? Isn't it more exciting that someone comes up with a new character? And I know people do that as well. It's just, is there someone out there who's actually devouring it all and enjoying it as well?
That's
because I even if I was a kid, I would imagine, like, if I went to the newsstand and I saw this on the,
overwhelming,
you would just glaze over. I'd look for the thing that popped out as something new, or
different.
So
why I brought all of this up is because what Watchmen used to be was the thing that you could hand somebody and be like, you don't need to know anything else.
Right.
The entire story is told in 12 issues. Every character is introduced here and finishes here, and it is its own thing, and it's considered the high watermark of this kind of comic. Like, it's considered to be as good as the superhero comic, or whatever you want to call it, gets. And you didn't have to say, and don't worry, there aren't any prequel series or sequel series or sidequel series, or there's no spin-offs. This is it. And now you can't do that. Now you have to, it comes with an asterisk. It's like Watchmen, and yes, there's all of this other ancillary shit around it, and now these characters have appeared and have stories that go off outside of this. And I think that was a mistake. I think it should have been left alone. It didn't need apocrypha written by other people. It was fine the way it was.
Anyway, one day we'll get around to talking about Tom Strong.
We are. We're gonna get there right now, because the reason I bring up Watchmen is because Watchmen's explosive ripple is really that comics go grimdark, right? So after Watchmen comes out and Frank Miller's the Dark Knight, it becomes this thing to be like, okay, every superhero comic has to be super grim, it has to be these all these heroes have to have feet of clay, right? We can't just have that simple kind of old-fashioned, Silver
Robin,
Age hero.
Robin with the alimony payments and
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly where it
actually,
goes in the
I bet
90s.
that's probably I didn't just make
I'm
that.
sure it is a spin-off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no doubts. And so yeah, I think that basically comics all through the 90s become this like morass of like they're not for kids at all anymore. Like they've completely, I mean, and maybe they weren't for a while before that, but really by the time the 90s comes around, they're for an increasingly narrow, tiny niche of obsessives and who want everything to be like dark, I guess. And Alan Moore, in the same way that like what's Rage Against the Machine issued a public apology, right, saying if we had known that what we did would lead to Korn and all of that other new metal shit,
or in
we
fact
wouldn't.
Rage Against the Machine.
Oh yeah, or yeah, our own albums. In fact, yes, we would never have put a minute of music to tape. And I feel like Alan Moore. This is what we're going to talk about right now. Once we jump back on, is Alan Moore's mea culpa. Alan Moore's I'm sorry for what I did. Here's that joyous kitty crap.
All right, let's do that. And then 40 minutes after that, we'll start talking about Tom Strong.
That's the plan.
Right. Okay.
So basically, there's like he does a few other things that lead up to this. He does something called Supreme, where he takes over a comic by fairly infamous comic creator called Rob Liefeld. So you know about the whole when a bunch of artists broke off from Marvel and DC and formed that what the hell was it called? Image Comics, right? Todd McFarlane being the most famous, and his Spawn comic being kind of like the flagship title of that,
which
comic.
Is one of those things I've never ever read, and I only know Spawn because of that dodgy film. And
I've actually never seen the film. I read a few issues, but it wasn't
was
really
a Saturday morning cartoon as well. Maybe I seem to remember. So have you read Spawn?
No, I mean I did. I read it back then, and I read a few. My one of my friends was collecting it, so I read some of his, but it wasn't. I never bought any.
So it never grabbed you.
No.
Oh, okay, because again, why not? It's tangent time, clearly. Because the one that falls into this category, which I still haven't got around to, but it's the one that always and I'm wondering how many is. Oddly, I was talking about this before with Ron on another show in terms of comedians, right? Because I don't know if you ever listened to the Mark Maron's WTF podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I listen to it sometimes. It depends with the guest. I don't really need to hear Mark Maron's neurotic rants at the beginning. I usually fast forward those until the guest comes on, right? But one thing I think he is quite good at is when he interviews comics in particular, and they talk about like scenes, right, in like different parts of the country and at different times, and he kind of slowly uncovers this kind of map of the United States, like different comic scenes over the decades, which I find quite fascinating as someone who likes pulling red string across cork.
Yes,
as you know.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is, there's just not enough cork boards in the world for all.
No.
Yeah,
or string. Yeah.
But what's interesting is you. There are so many. There's so many examples of people in the world of comedy who were like shit hot, right? Shit hot, and you would have been privileged to see them perform. And it's almost always before the wider world discovers them, right? And it's very hard for you to really that like I suppose the classic example is the name whose man I've just forgotten, the other talk show host, Whitehead.
Jay Leno.
Yeah, Jay Leno. Like Jay Leno was considered like
that's my understanding.
Comedian, right? And I just I can't believe it. So because he's just and there's other examples like apparently in his scene in the like way years and years before he was making Dana Carvey, for example. Apparently, Dana Carvey, hilarious, you know, and you're thinking, really? Like, I just can't see it. So, and a similar thing in comics. So the classic example I always think of is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right?
Yes.
So from what I understand, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles starts as this kind of really
almost underground,
out there, proper cool kind of comic, and it is now what it is, right? And and I've never gone back to read those original.
Oh, okay, the black and whites.
Yeah. So are they actually really good, or is that another
thing? They're fun.
Oh, okay.
They're fun, but I don't know that I consider them to be examples of great, you know, anything. I mean, the drawing is nice, actually. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't. It's very episodic. It's quite quickly starts to gear towards the more. So that first issue,
get their reputation as that thing.
I just think it was like the concept was it was just hugely popular with kids. I think it was just so weird.
But before it was popular with kids, though, like I'm saying, it was popular with
with teenagers, comic collectors.
Yeah.
But also, I think you're talking about a time when, you know, what was being offered by the mainstream, like by DC and Marvel, would have been, you know, pretty tired. You know, by that point, like that, there wasn't a lot of like, you know, late 70s, early 80s is not a great time for mainstream comics in the States, right? More interesting stuff is happening in England, I think, at that time than is happening in the US for sure. And then it takes things like Upstart,
brain drain, right?
So it takes the combination of bringing over artists from England and bringing over writers, and then also
making them write fucking Spider-Man and Batman.
Yes.
It's a Hollywood thing, isn't it? It's a Hollywood thing of someone in Uruguay or somewhere makes like an amazing low budget film, and the people are like, kid, okay, and they, you know, and then they make them some fucking
Fast and the Furious 9 or whatever. So no, I think yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. But I mean, it also, I think, in fairness, a lot of those people they were like Alan Moore grew up reading Superman.
Yes.
I mean, and Batman, and was like, fuck yes, like yes, please give me those characters to play with.
Maybe this is finally our segue into Tom Strong, is it?
We're getting close. We're getting close.
Okay.
So he takes over this comic called Supreme, which is basically a Superman, like not a parody, but like a mean-spirited kind of like Superman's an asshole kind of like a concept, right?
Okay.
And Rob Liefeld does this thing for however many issues, and then Alan Moore kind of comes to, or I don't know, an agreement with Todd McFarlane and the people at Image Comics. He's going to write for them. And so he's allowed to take over Supreme, and he does what he always does, in a way, like when he did Miracle Man right at the very beginning, his first superhero comic, right? Marvel Man, Miracle Man for Warrior. He's gonna detonate a bomb and basically wipe away all the continuity and remake this character, right? So he does that with Swamp Thing as well, right? When he comes over to the States.
And does he also make one entire issue a kind of Victorian throwback to example of that character, which is 90% text with some pictures? That's
almost certainly.
That's another trick he likes to pull.
Yes. So he does, but what he does this time is he in every other time before this, it seems like he's taken something that was kind of like kiddie or like whatever you want to say, kid friendly or conventional, and tried to add these layers of depth and tried to kind of make it something heavier and more serious and with more gravitas.
And this meta as well. And meta as well. This is
And this is, well, okay, the meta-ness is not going to go anywhere, but this is the first time that he goes the opposite direction. He goes, I'm going to take this mean-spirited, shitty take on Superman, and I'm going to write it like it's a 1960s Superman comic.
Okay.
I am going to put all the stupid back in. I'm going to put Crypto the fucking super dog and like a whole bunch of like supporting family characters and stuff into this, and I'm going to play it completely straight. Except that there'll be a meta element, but it'll be played like, and it's really good. It may be better. I may have been remembering it more than Tom Strong, possibly, But it's really good. I mean, or at least I think it is. I could reread it and maybe it's not, but it seemed really good when I
You
first read
might be having a martial law moment.
it. I could be, yeah, it's entirely possible. Um, but Tom Strong, so then he decides he's going to start like his own comic book imprint, basically, right? So he hooks up with a guy called Jim Lee, who was also a person from Image. He's an artist, and they come up with a concept. He's going to write several titles for this new comic, America's Best Comics,
Right.
right? The most famous of which you've already mentioned, right, which is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I think is not just the most famous, but is the best of this.
That is
set.
definitely him and Kevin O'Neill at the top of their game, right?
Right. But the concept for this is basically he's going to do superhero comics without having superheroes. He's going to imagine a variety of different kind of branches of that, like early fantastic fiction or whatever. So League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right, is where he pulls all these characters, as you know, from like old horror stories and old science fiction stories and puts them into this Victorian.
Well, and it's a very specific British.
Oh yes,
Albion take. Right? The thing about Tom Strong, in some ways, reminded me a little bit of it's like the US version of. Do you know what I mean? That concept.
So Tom Strong specifically was his idea of like, well, what if there were never really superheroes, but more like, what if Doc Savage and Tarzan were like the only model for the superhero? And so this is what Tom Strong is supposed to be.
What's fascinating, again, this is again with US comics. What's fascinating to me is still the idea in US comics to make comics revolutionary is, how about if we do this with superhero comics, or take superhero comics here, or stop doing superhero comics, write a comic about someone who opens a noodle shop, or a fireman, or and I know people are doing that at the margins and stuff as well. But it's just like just stop reinventing. Just don't do them, or just do them and something. Just widen the. Do you know what I mean? It's like endless ways of
doing the same thing. Yeah,
it's mind-boggling to me. But that shouldn't be the norm. That should be something going on the sidelines, right? While people are getting on with doing other, I think anyway. But then again, I'm in that environment, I suppose. So that's normalized for me, that you go to a comic shop here and there's just
a much wider array of subject matter, right? Yeah. That's considered to be Whereas for whatever reason in North America, it's just superheroes. All the way.
It does make you wonder what, because it's not as if it's. I mean, that's how comics started here, right? And you've got Tezuka aping Disney and doing Astro Boy, and it's still, it came from the fantastic and the child friendly here. It's not. It's not because we started from a different place. So you do wonder what is it just because. Is it just because comics are slightly frowned upon medium that aren't considered for adults, therefore it's always been saddled to being kiddie and superhero?
I wonder if that, so I mean, because there was a time when obviously, again, even comics in North America, it's always going to have that kind of binary good guy, bad guy stuff going on. But there were, cowboy comics, there were horror comics, crime comics.
That's true.
Now, I said, like, they're more realistically and narratively, they're going to be still pretty simplistic. But there was a lot more variety actually in comics in the 30s and 40s and 50s than there is by the 70s. And I do think the comics code maybe is part of it. I think once they basically said, no, you can't do crime comics with any degree of grit, you can't do horror comics with any, it kind of left the pool of what you could do shrinking,
But even something like, I mean, I'm sure it's still around in some form or another, but I feel as if there would have been more things like, for example, Archie comics. It's not as if I'm huge, but just tales of everyday life and stuff like that, as opposed to
and I mean, and comics for girls as well were something that was a thing,
right?
But kind of stopped being a thing again by the late 70s, early 80s. Comics, as I said, increasingly was like the readership shrunk massively from the 50s through the 80s, right? Maybe literacy rates shrunk massively as well. I don't know, but I mean, it's just And so one of Alan Moore's great complaints was that the people who wrote comics in the 50s and 60s, in that kind of gold, or maybe the Silver Age, they were all writers. They were all novelists. They were all like people who wrote short stories that were published in like, like the fantasy and speculative fiction magazines at the time, right? They were writers. They weren't fans of comics.
I like how this show has slowly become two old men moaning about another old man moaning.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah. And so as a result, he said what happens is at some point, all of those writers who were real writers tried to more or less unionize and fight for their rights as creators and get more money for the scripts they were doing for, these comic book companies. And so those comic book companies were like, no, basically fired them and started bringing in the fans. That's when you first see kind of writers who are people who are like, oh, I've always wanted to write Batman or Superman or whatever. They're not, there's, these other, people, they couldn't have given a shit. They were like, it's a job, and they're writers, and they're gonna do they're gonna do it to the best of their ability. And they weren't just constantly recycling what somebody had done right before them, right? They were trying to come up with new stuff. So he says basically comics take a precipitous dive, and then it just becomes an endless circle of like increasingly amateur kind of fans, writing stuff that's based off of a previous generation of amateur fans.
Someone's bothering you there.
Sorry?
Someone's mithering you there.
Yeah, I'm gonna maybe just close off although it's how we're communicating, but I will close off my little meta window there. So yeah, what the hell was I saying?
Tom Strong. Let's get there.
Yeah. So no, I think we're done. I think we've talked about Tom Strong.
Yeah.
Okay. That was our Tom Strong episode, everybody.
Considering I thought this episode would be 5 minutes long, we are fucking rabbiting on about it.
There was a lot of context, to be established there. But yeah, so basically, Tom Strong. Here's the nice. I've forgotten this guy's name.
Savage image.
Yeah, it's quite nice. Wait, the fuck, can I remember his name? It's Alex something, I believe. Anyway, he was a guy who became quite famous for doing these very nice, realistic kind of paintings of superheroes around this time.
So Tom Strong kicks off in about 1999. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, around the same time as League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and Promethea and several other comics for ABC
yeah. So Promethea as well. So in order to talk about this, you said to me, "Oh, you might want to read
one issue."
Yeah,
that kind of sets up the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Which wasn't really that. I appreciate you pointed it out, but it wasn't really like no. And I didn't get on. I mean, Tom Strong, I enjoyed. We'll get to how much I know, but Tom Strong was definitely 10 times better than Promethea for me. Because Promethea is doing a similar kind of thing as well, a little bit in some ways, right?
Yes. As is, I think, League of Extraordinary. It's kind of, he's doing these various riffs. It's like he's suddenly become Jess Franco at this point in his career, and he's going to take the same idea and riff on it in like several different forms, right?
But League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is the one, right? That's the one that works. And I'm wondering if it is. It seems simplified, maybe, but I'm wondering if it's just because it's British stuff.
And with a British artist. With the synergy,
that seems between more fresh, just because those characters haven't had as much of an airing.
That's
I think so. There's that. And also, I think it might.
But Kevin O'Neill, I think you can't.
Yeah, of course, and Kevin O'Neill. Right. But it's not the artwork I have a problem with in Promethea and Tom Strong.
No,
for example. But no, obviously Kevin O'Neill's next level. But even beyond that, I think what works about it is, and maybe it's because it's kind of much more grounded as well, right? Because those characters I don't know if the characters in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen count as superheroes exactly. Mm-hmm. They're extraordinary gentlemen, right? So there aren't real moments of just like, as much as it's kind of parodying or pastiching, there's an awful lot of Tom Strong where you suddenly do get two big bulky guys in spandex, in the
Right.
air punching each other or something. And
Yes.
if you just take that panel or whatever out, you're just thinking, oh, this is
more of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas League, there's not that much of that in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I don't think it's
no, other than maybe obviously because the Hulk was inspired by that concept of Jekyll and Hyde, so therefore some of the Jekyll and Hyde stuff in there, I guess, has
a little bit. But anyway, for whatever reason, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is it's the winner of the bunch, right? It's this kind of concept by quite a margin as well.
Yes, no arguments there. But there is something to be said for me anyway. There's something to be said about that hankering for like a simpler kind of like the fact that he does more or less for the most part play it pretty straight here. This is kind of a series of like kid-friendly romp adventure kind of yarns that come, after he's kind of done all of this work deconstructing the myth and kind of, showing the feet of clay and all that stuff and talking about fascism, all that stuff. He's kind of come out the other end and be like, yeah, but what if we just did it straight-faced and kind of,
dare I say, it might even be make comics great again.
Could be
a little bit. There's a little bit of red hat wearing about it, isn't there? A little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, Top Strong even looks a little bit.
Oh yeah, he's got the big red shirt. He's clearly signaling his Republican tendencies. So yeah, I mean, the concept is basically just that this guy has become a Superman through scientific means, right? He's an experiment. His parents, who had this plan, well, his dad had this plan to put him in a gravity chamber. This is kind of pulling from John Carter of Mars, right? Which is where all of
and it's also from. If the Nazis were successful as well to a certain
right? Basically, yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm as much as we might have enough of him every now and again, Alan Moore is smart enough of a guy. I'm sure all this has occurred to him way before it occurred to us while he was writing the thing. So I it is and there are slight references to that every now and again, right? That he's playing. He's playing. It's a sand pit, isn't it? He's playing, and you shouldn't necessarily take it too seriously, right? That in the way that some people maybe did with things like Watchmen and stuff like that, right? Like as if no, this is it. We must do things in this vein forever. Like we can't go back, kind of thing, or
and what I think what I like most about it, other than the kind of like the feel goodness of it all, like the fact that like there's a lot of episodes that end with him like not fighting the bad guy, but like let's think our way out of this, like which is just something kind of sweet and silly about that. But I think it's the fact that like the episodes or whatever, because they feel like episodes to me. It feels more episodic than a lot of.
But deliberately so, because they sometimes he uses like a flashback or something to indulge, like he does in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where it'll suddenly turn into a history of a pirate comic for a while, or that happens here, right? So you'll have it goes to like, it deliberately goes back to like something from the 50s, like a Tom.
Yes, and they'll even have they'll have hired an artist to do that chunk of the story that looks roughly like it might have been drawn,
and it's all done really well. I could have done without them cutting back to a little boy saying "holy socks" every now and again, though, because
I didn't even mind that.
I don't like that.
There wasn't
one of the worst examples I've ever heard of some. What's a phrase we can come up with that sounds like something people say? Holy moly, holy socks. That's shit. That is just
right. But it's supposed to be kind of like I assumed it was supposed to be terrible, like that it was supposed to be a nod to like Robin in the old Batman TV series.
Yeah, but sometimes something just goes. It's just it's
full circle.
Rubbish. Yeah.
Right. Sure.
I don't know why that just irritated me every time that little kid. I know it's a small hill to die on, but no, holy socks, no.
but I liked, yeah, I think I like the fact that you come in and then you're given, yeah, you are given. It feels grander than it is because you're given these ridiculous little flashbacks to Tom Strong's adventures in the 40s and his adventures in the 60s, and
Right.
but I like the fact that I could read each issue and just set it aside and then start the next one, not be thinking, oh, do I have to remember what happened in issue 7, or do I need to, like, that they were, there was very little. And then when it occasionally did pay things off, well, either it didn't, which I thought was interesting, because I was like, they're eventually they're gonna pay off like this ape character in some way. Like, we're gonna find out who the fuck he is, or how he became Tom Strong's sidekick, right? Solomon, the talking, like, gorilla. And they, unless I missed it, they never do. There's never any explanation of like why he can talk or how he became Tom Strong's,
Right.
Right. And I appreciated that, because that's very anti what comics is nowadays. Everyone feels the need to tell you the backstory and the esoteric lore of like that guy who appears in the back of that panel or whatever.
There are some really badly underwritten characters, though, like the daughter and the wife.
Yes. Is that because Alan was not quite sure how to write Caribbean ladies?
Characters, right? Like they really do feel like,
and it really shows up when he then brings them back in a way, because like there's a story that I think is actually quite good. I'd forgotten about it actually until I came back to it, but it's basically it's basically Alan Moore's end of his original run, right? He does those 3 episodes that imagine another version of Tom Strong, right? Tom Stone, who's like a half black, version, right? And I went back. I don't know, did you go back? I went back to the first panel of the first issue to see if there was in fact like a deckhand or whatever, or a guy on the ship or whatever. And he is actually in that. So obviously it was probably intended. But I quite like those 3 issues because they are a little heavier. They have a kind of quite a nice sad ending, but it really stuck out at me that like all of the characters were better written. Like all of the supporting characters who in the main stories were kind of like, you were kind of flat and, as you said, very thin, were somehow a little bit more rounded and a bit more interesting in that alternate.
Were those ones written by other people, or were they Alan Moore?
No, all right, that was Alan Moore basically. Yeah, that. And I like
other people do come in to write it later on, like
yes,
including Michael Moorcock, who I'm starting to realize more and more. I mean, I knew Alan Moore was a devotee of Michael Moorcock, but the more you read, the more you realize maybe quite how influential Michael Moorcock's world is on Alan Moore. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
although also a lot of that Alan Moore, that Michael Moorcock has like an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Which he comes back to again, and like obsessive. And I think that's
maybe the problem I had with Tom Strong a little bit was it did feel like if League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was the rich first cup of tea, Tom Strong felt like reused tea bags. Do you know what I mean? A little bit,
right,
a little bit weak. Yeah, and,
right.
And I don't know. It might also have to do with. So the thing that I'm familiar with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in collected graphic novel form, which I think it makes a lot more sense as because it's all in one place and you're looking at it like a book or whatever, and it occasionally switches entirely to text, right?
Yes.
For that part. Now I don't know if that's something that was, but I can imagine if you were picking up individual comics as you went along, like the day you picked up the one that was all text, fuck, really? Not that what's in it isn't kind of interesting, but when you have it all in one place like that, it's kind of somehow it makes more sense. And so I don't know if this works as episodic, like the collected Tom Strong would make more sense, and I know it has been. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you don't want to be, on the one hand, you don't want to deny that part of it because it's part of the font. But then on the other hand, yeah, it would be a dark day at the newsagent when you pick up the all text issue of Thomas. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, agreed. But I do, for me, part of the fun of these was the feeling. I never got that feeling that I couldn't just do one a night and have it like a caramel or whatever. Like it was just like something kind of sweet and easy on the brain and fun, like kind of like
all right.
like
I think you clearly enjoy these a lot more than, not that I hate.
I'm not saying I love them, and I'm not saying
no.
I think that they're the high watermark of anybody's work, not his and not comics in general. But there's something.
I'd had enough after 5 issues, to be honest.
Okay.
Like it was kind of rollicking fun, and I liked the imagery, I liked some of the ideas and stuff. But I could always feel this, like for something like this to work, I prefer that the conceptual meta cerebral part to be in the background.
Right.
Like, it's there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. No. Sometimes it's.
And I feel like this. It's you can really feel him working really hard to, and it just, I don't know, it gets in the way of you just enjoying it
as a story.
Yeah. So, and I don't have that problem with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen necessarily, because somehow he manages to keep that stuff in the breaks, if you see what I mean. Whereas here it invades the actual the comic, and there's some good stuff. Like I really liked I really did like the time traveling, dimension jumping Aztecs.
Right. Yeah.
Up in there. I thought that was quite. There's definitely nice, cool ideas.
I like the insane one where they're the like the version of Tom Strong from like some other planet at the other end of the universe runs physically, just himself runs across the universe. It's through space. I was like, that's insane. And enjoyably insane.
And I think what lets it down sometimes, oddly enough, is he almost can't resist the wink to the audience. And I'm thinking a lot of this would play so much better if it was totally straight up.
Right.
Totally straight up.
Agreed.
Have that pure pulp fantasia happen, and then not cut to a little boy saying "holy socks," or a Cockney gorilla. Oh, like I don't mind the gorilla character, but it's just like, it's clearly put in there, and it's like he's almost used almost always as undercutting comic relief. And again, I know I get it. Maybe that's part of the extended thing that he's using these tropes around there. But it's just sometimes I was just thinking this would work so much better if you could resist showing us how clever you are.
Yeah, and even more.
Just show us, just give us the pulp, because you understand this stuff, and you understand. I think Alan Moore understands. He fundamentally understands how pulp works, and how when it goes wrong, and what you need to do to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone comes around to my house to fix my boiler, I want them to fix the boiler, and the boiler works. I don't necessarily need to be told about the intricacies of boiler making and the history of boilers, because hurry up, please, I want a bath.
Right.
But again, you don't
always want to be taken backstage. You don't always want to see how the magic works. But
I did like some of it, and again, it's also there's a personal thing here. I think just in general, because I don't think prior to 2008, Eagle and 2018, I almost have no history with proper straight up Superman style superhero comics. Like
Right.
that kind of superhero thing wasn't part of my childhood. Like I said before, for some reason I had a huge stack of old Commando and War and Battle Picture Library comics, and they
Because you
informed.
were a man's boy.
Well, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. For some reason, in the same way as you know, Star Wars seems to be something that I sidestepped in childhood. So I don't necessarily have the nostalgia to help you a lot, because you did read some superhero comics when you were a kid, right?
Yeah, not as a little kid so much, but more because they weren't really around.
Well, that's my point.
My
They
mom
weren't.
mentioned that they were when she was small, that she was getting Marvel like in the six, like the early
Yes,
60s.
we were in that weird gap when they went like. I'm guessing, especially in living rural like I was, you'd go to the newsagent, there'd be a load of British comics,
Yeah.
And then sometimes there'd be the rare sighting of an American comic, right? Because it was a different format.
Yeah,
But it was very rare. It was only in some newsagents or really well-stocked newsagents. More like my local newsagent, they had the British ones, but you'd never see a Marvel or a DC.
No.
And I don't.
The only American style comics you saw were the reprints of 2008
Yes.
that were done by Eagle, right, in that US format, right, and recolored. And then later on, what was it? There was another.
Well, there was the Marvel UK stuff that Des Skin was putting out and stuff like that as well, right? But again, I think we kind of either just missed that, or
they
didn't necessarily have great distribution. Maybe.
Yeah, no, you had to basically go to a special. You had to go up to Dublin on the train and go to Forbidden Planet or the Virgin Megastore. Yeah. Those are the only places that I ever saw. And I was older by then. I was 12 or 13 by the time that I was seeing that. So when I was a little kid, I had the only context I had for Spider-Man and all that stuff was cartoons. So I knew superheroes.
That stuff, because of its scarcity, it was always a little bit expensive as well for a kid with limited pocket money, right? It was quite a big deal to invest in something like that, right?
Yeah.
Also, you don't. So I wonder because you see.
Then I moved to Canada. So I mean, I did before I left. I saw Watchmen, or I read Watchmen. I got Killing Joke. So when I moved to Canada, that was right around the time a lot of the people I had been reading in 2008 had gone over. So Alan Grant and John Wagner were suddenly writing for Marvel and DC.
So is that why you have slight more sympathy and time for?
I think so. When I was a little kid, I always liked that shit. I liked Condor Man, for Christ's sake. I liked anything that had people dressed up in Superman the film was a massive thing for me as a little kid.
Right. Yeah, that's another one we
loved it.
Differ on as well, isn't it?
Superman. I remember seeing Superman 2 in the cinema. And so Terrence Stamp is still, to my mind, one of the great villains of cinema.
Let's not forget the greatest superhero of our time as well, Superman.
Exactly. Yes.
Watch out, Batman, Iceman, Spider-Man, Batman and Robin 2. Now that's a superhero film. Did Alan Moore ever do Superman?
We can only hope. So yeah, I said, I mean, like with anything, your mileage may vary.
Your mileage and mileage may vary. Yes.
So I think it's fun, but I don't think it's brilliant. And you think it's occasionally fun, and sometimes tiresome. Would that be fair?
I would say that is correct. And next time we'll be doing Superman comics.
Yes, excellent. Which we're going to make ourselves.
What if they ever did spin-off? Like, even if there's just like one standalone Superman summer special or something.
Yeah, we should look into this. I would wonder too if maybe would she have shown up in parody in Oink magazine or something like that.
We need to get to Oink.
Oh yeah, we have it, don't we? I think.
But those things disappear, so we might want to get to it before someone removes it, right? Because you never know with that stuff.
Oh, I thought we had PDFs. I thought we had. found it somewhere.
Well, if
so
you
maybe-
do, please share it. No, they're on Internet
Oh,
Archive.
they're on a readable thing online. Okay, yeah. Maybe we should put that.
Maybe we should do Oink next. Maybe
Your choice next. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do Oink. It's a great place to finish. We've gone from Alan Moore attempting to do his mea culpa and say sorry for ruining comics by taking them seriously. And
next
and
time
then,
we'll do some proper comics. And
yes,
Oink.
yeah, sounds good.
Until then.